you.
Nice to meet you too. How are you doing?
I'm great. I'm here at the clinic wrapping up for my patients.
Oh, has it been a long day?
Well, no, because today of the Thanksgiving holiday, I worked only just the afternoon, a few patients
Ah,
for continuity. I usually work Saturdays. It is a usual work day for me.
oh, is that right? So you get
Yeah, because this kind of medicine being complementary, many people like to associate with a time out from daily stresses, so they love coming on Saturdays
right.
because they don't have to work and different mindset.
So you have a Sunday, Monday as your break from responsibilities
Yeah.
such as yeah.
Well, I'm kind of like on a mission. I'm kind of 7 days a week. I am doing some kind of service. So Sundays, I typically teach an online class.
Oh, wow.
We my wife and I we teach online programs on energy and perception and awareness. And then on Mondays, I usually work for educational programs because I have a combination of a clinical practice and a teaching practice.
Right. Well, energy must be your thing because you sure seem to have a lot of it.
Thank you. Thank you.
So I want to just say that the Carlos books for me, I read them when I was 16, Tales of Power, and my whole trajectory of life took off from those books and my interpretation of that information. So any language that you would normally use, feel free to use in this interview. You don't need to interpret certain.
Yeah.
Okay, good.
So it looks like this is a project of the heart for you. How did you come to this?
It's of the heart and for the expansion of consciousness, my own and my interaction with people such as yourself, and to share it and to hopefully be a part of the expansion that's taking place for everybody. That's what I feel, where I feel compelled to direct my attention, and that's also, of course, a 7-day-a-week, 24-hour. It's my life. Yeah. It's not a vocation.
And how do you monetize from the project?
I don't.
I see. So it's a project of the heart. That's why I mentioned that.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, and I don't even put ads on the videos. It just seems not right. So for me, the information is available to whoever finds it and whoever is interested.
So you basically you research, you find different people, and then you reach out, and then you do interviews like with me. And then you post them in your webpage.
That's right. And I'm working on a documentary as well, with putting together a lot of this information to sort of give a step-by-step process of possibility, where we limit possibility, and by having unlimited possibility, where some people have created possibilities, whether it's reaching the Dome of the Nagual for Don Juan or somebody such as that, or whether it's a Buddhist, whatever their achievements are, that whatever our limits of our possibility is what we're capable of. So basically I'm exploring that and how various even religions, where they limit capability and possibility, and where other people have taken, particularly now, it seems like a time of a lot of openness and a lot of like anything is possible. A lot of people are going in two directions, it seems. Which actually, yes. I don't want to talk too much about that because that's actually how I enter our conversation. I'd like to ask you that question in the form of how would you describe the state of the world today, and what's your understanding of what's happening in the world today?
Yeah. We live in a very poignant time in the planet, and certainly my way of looking at this is similar to how my teacher, Carlos Castaneda, kind of looked at this kind of energetic equations. When there's a movement towards a higher consciousness, if there's enough momentum and force for that change, then it highlights the resistances even further. So if nothing much is happening, then both can kind of coexist in a very slow movement of evolution. But when there's a market inflection point, because like my teacher said, change doesn't always happen gradually. There is the onslaught pace of evolution, but there's also at times seemingly jumps in evolution. And this is a moment because the possibilities in the world in terms of communication mostly reached a critical place, or in terms of the social media and the capacity that we have to be knowing what's happening way beyond the confines of our tribe, as it was perhaps the most primitive way of communication. This jump, right? So then when there's a jump, an acceleration, then the resistances will be forced to show up more intensely. It's almost like an impersonal balance of forces plays out. So my belief is to choose where I position myself. The way I learned to functionally apprehend the world, my teacher would call it the mode of our time, the tonal of the world, is you do an inventory, to be aware of the forces playing out, and so we map it, and so we are fully cognizant. We don't take a stand of being checked out, right? We fully immerse ourselves. We go inside. And then once we see the world, when we take a choice, our standpoint is ultimately a choice. So I choose to look at the state of the world from the point of view of how exciting the possibilities. And I'm cognizant of all the forces that are at play to resist that. And the dark forces and all the separation. And I think that inevitably the momentum of evolution is going towards a place where the critical mass, meaning minimum number of individuals in the world, having a consensus of a higher way of relating to themselves, a more holistic, a more spiritual, a more integrated, is going to continue. So I choose to look at this as an exciting time. And, if we look at just from the point of view of science, right now, I had the opportunity to attend a conference recently on a presentation by one of the leading companies that advise large corporations and governments on where is the pace of technology leading. And the presentation was very eye-opening, because even mathematically, there are projections where the technological pace of change and invention is now in a just at the point where it shoots up tremendously, the acceleration of it. And so they laid out already 5 years from now, 15 years from now, 25 years from now, technologically. And what happens is that between the molecular biology and the incorporation of data, metrics, and means to incorporate technology into the human physiology is going to be such that 25 years from now, if one would choose to and had the means financially to incorporate what would be available at the time in terms of the interface between human biology and technology, what the result will be the enhancement of human function to such a degree of separation from what the biological human being is capable of today, that the emergence will be of a complete new species. They call it transhumans, the interface between biology and biology and technology. So that on one hand, we have that just in the horizon, and this is something that is happening. It's not a possibility. It's definitely happening. At the same time that the other forces of how the planet is faring in the ecology, that's number one. And number two is the divisions and fights between people, the differences, right? But even though there's all these differences seemingly more than ever today, statistically speaking, we are now in a relatively peaceful time in our history, in human history. It's just that the most small event is available and known everywhere in the world simultaneously. So everything seems much bigger, but we actually are relatively in a peaceful time. And so within all this, there's the chance of the emergence also of a higher consciousness. Let's call this from Homo sapiens to Homo Universalis. Homo Universalis is a beautiful concept that I was recently at a conference in Switzerland where leaders from all over the world, Africa, South America, North America, Asia, gathered there to kind of it was a living workshop. It was both a proposition to discuss and create a higher understanding, but also an experiential coming together from different cultures, different traditions, different disciplines of the human spirit, and seeing what can emerge, what is in the cooking pot in our planet at this point. And there was a big consensus about the emergence of this new consciousness that integrates all these possibilities that we have available from technology, but at the service of a higher state of consciousness, the Homo Universalis, right? A universal spirituality. And so that's where I am.
So I'm curious, because you come from a tradition that suggests that just a movement of the assemblage point, an agreement among a mass of people of a movement of assemblage point, can create a totally different reality for everybody. And it seems like as above, so below, if you want to call it that, or maybe the first attention has its own view of what's going on in the second attention, or in the energy world, whereas everything is getting more, like you were saying, communications are so quick and so universal, at least within the human understanding. Is that a reflection, do you think, of what's happening at the level of energy?
I believe so. Yes. The concept that my teacher had was what would happen. This was a speculation that he proposed. What would happen if we reached critical mass, consensus of looking at things from the energetic standpoint, looking at the world from the perspective of energy, or noticing and seeing the essence of things as we interact with the world, having one foot you and I are having this conversation, and I'm in my clinic, in my office, you are in this home, and we have the screen. That's one layer of the world where we are relating to. But then I'm also conscious of the energy field that is generating between our conversation, the particular mood that I see through your eyes, the language of our bodies, the context that we are in having this conversation while the planet is traveling at 100,000 kilometers per hour, and so forth. So I'm also having a consciousness of these other layers, and it creates a different set of parameters through which, if we both had the consensus, and if the world had that consensus, then the way human beings put priorities and interface with each other will change in an instant. That critical mass. There's something when the forces agglutinate in one direction, and it's in the physics of it, right? The world of energy and the foundation of things you can also have a mathematical platform, a patterning. Energy moves in patterns. So if there's a pattern of agreement that creates an agglutinating force, and then bang. I was once at a workshop where we would, the presenters, we were putting forward a sort of like a theater presentation, which was called this was something based on the tradition of the Sears of Ancient Mexico, or the modern Sears of Mexico, which was called the Theater of Infinity. And essentially is you put a number of theater that is basically with the intention of exclusively to serve as a jolt to move the assemblage point, or perceptual point. And so this was such a presentation, and then there was an audience of perhaps 300 people. And so we had devised this energetic speculation strategy between us, the presenters, where we had inserted one of us on the team within, interspersed in the audience, maybe 6 or 7 of us within the 300 people, not that many, but essentially at a given moment in the presentation, there was a sound that was made that depicted the consciousness of a different kind of awareness. This was a moth in that case, but it was meant to connect us to a different kind of vibration. And so, without any instructions to the people in this moment, that from stage we're doing the sound, one of us stood up in the audience and made the same sound standing, and then over there a second one of us that had already prepared stands up and does the same sound, and then you start seeing what happens with human consciousness. There's when some new input comes in, the first thing is when that information comes into a perceptual field, we reference it instantaneously with all our prior experiences, our memory. We immediately elaborate sort of like a response to it, and in this case, it was an invitation to enter into this other way of behaving. And so first it's like, oh, what's happening? And then the second step is, interesting. And then is, well, I'm just going to stand up as well. So then after 2 or 3 of us had stood up, and this happened in a matter of seconds, you could see that here and there, one or another of the audience people would also stand up and start doing the same sound with us. And then, in a matter of maybe 10, 15 seconds, there was a moment where you could see how the agreement of consciousness was spreading, and you could almost see physically the volume and the momentum of it. And so 3 stand up, 4, 7, 10, and then in 1 second to the next, it went from maybe 20 or 25 people standing to 300 people standing. And you could see how critical mass operates. It has almost a physicality to it. It's a pool, it's a wave. In this case, you could see it beautifully because it was all happening within the same vista, the same physical location, in a conglomerate of people in a conference center. But at the planetary level, it's the same thing. We're all connected. My wife and I, we teach online classes, and we may, for example, be having a class live with 200 people connecting with just like you and I are here, but through a video teleconferencing software, so we can have 200 live cameras happening at the same time. And so one of the things that has become overtly clear to me by experience is that the lines of communication and influencing of one another can absolutely take place through the airwaves, right? So there's an intent of this consensus of interaction at the energy level happens without the need of a physical interaction. So this critical mass momentum is the same thing that happened in this one condensed few seconds in an emerito is what I see happening in the world. And there's this emergence of a momentum by the people who carry this. And I think because of the nature of the world today, there's no way that there can be one path that has the monopoly of the way. Clearly, all the knowledge of all traditions is available in the same cooking pot. And so there's a fascinating, almost like an imperative of cross-pollinating between different vistas of the spirit world, of the energy world. And so we are in a super dynamic soup at the time. We are being stirred by the forces of the universe and cooking at high temperatures. It was a great time. I wouldn't change it for anything. Yeah.
Yeah, boy, you cover such a lot. There's so many directions I want to go with little bits that you've said. One direction, actually, which I was going to ask, by having such obviously a powerful man as a teacher or as a guide, as Carlos Castaneda, what of those? What I imagine that information has evolved for you, because obviously you haven't erased personal history, I would imagine, because in a certain way, because you're making yourself known. You talk about your past. It doesn't seem to be as covert as maybe the tradition has been in the past. Like you say, everything seems to be opening up.
Yes.
They had definite goals with their definitive journey had a definite goal. It seems to me. I could be wrong. You're saying that there doesn't seem to be one way, but is there a definitive goal for humanity in your view? Does the critical mass have to agree on something, or is that dictated by spirit?
Yeah. Well, first, just to for the first part of your commentary, yes, this is a different time, and the context in which the tradition that I learned from Castaneda existed pretty much until him was one where it was in small clusters of secrecy. Originally, it had because it was a shamanistic tradition, so it had a lot of rituals and secrecy. Then over the course of this past 50 years, maybe century, gradually the tradition became less ritualistic, more abstract in its concepts in nature. And then the last straw was that with my teacher Castaneda, it went from a secrecy tradition out into an open tradition. And that coincides with precisely a similar movement in the world with information, and not coincidentally. It's just because of that. So because the whole idea is that we are in an evolving universe. So our views, even I remember not that far ago listening to the Dalai Lama, His Holiness, talk about ancient Buddhist traditions that he's immersed in, obviously, and he was saying how science was coming up with incredible new understandings of the human mind and spirit, and he, maybe you heard, but he is someone who has supported a lot of research into meditation and so forth. And he says any new information that's discovered through this process of science that highlights or contradicts any of the traditional principles, I'm open to embrace it. And so that is a reflection of a different time. I would speculate that my teacher, had he be alive today in the world, he would absolutely embrace this new time. And the fact that he himself taught this openly to the world, and that was kind of his legacy, was to open the door. It makes it precisely an open knowledge. So the consensus that I was mentioned before, I think, is the matrix, is the consensus of what he would call seeing energy directly as it flows in the universe, an agreement that to gauge our conduct, our behavior, based more on those principles than in what's in it for me. What's in it for me? What he called the merchant mind, right? I do this, but then I want to get that. Or we are bound by the linearity. This A leads to B, and there's no other way, so we have to go to B, and so forth. A lot of the different dictums that we get from looking at the world in a linear way. So if I think that's the direction. Now, the means that we do to execute that maneuver of perception, of opening perception, that must not need to be only through, let's say, shamanistic practices. There are many ways to look at similar processes, but they all have a similar base. We have to know ourselves, understand what is our story. That's one thing. So how our belief system assembled as we're growing up, and then have the tools to be able to utilize consciousness to go back to those beliefs and bear upon them and free them and change the story. So how they exercise the choice to understand my story and to consciously choose a more enhancing story. That's one thing. The other one is that we need to have the apparatus workable, meaning our mind body. Our mind body is one unit, and we need to have the vitality, the fluidity, the curiosity, so that our vehicle that is within which our awareness is having an experience is conducive to take on the ride, right? So we need to have be conscious of what we eat, what we think, how we relate to others, how we sleep. And those basic in us, in our institute, essentially what we work with is a track. We call it the being energy methodology, which is in a way the modern version of today's version of the warrior's way, which was a traditional set of principles. Just like you may have a fully dedicated yogi may also have a whole set of behavioral principles based on that tradition. It's not just one thing, it's just a whole set of principles. So it includes all the behavioral aspects of it. And in the being energy methodology that we do, we are incorporating health in the big modern understanding what health is, which is not just vitality in the body and the absence of disease, or it is not even that. That's a fantasy. It's the always having an approach that is taking us towards higher functionality and dealing with what comes up, right? So at the physical level, and then having an experience of spirit and awareness. And so we need to address both things. We need to address the whole apparatus, and then we have game. And I think for the world today, we need all our apparatus to take on the challenge of what world is today.
And what is your understanding of conflict? I mean, it seems conflict is something that's innate in our story as a being. It's. Do you see it as what's your understanding of its relationship to consciousness? Conflict.
Yeah, conflict. Well, so to confront, to be in the presence of something that is a difference, that is different, then so we have to kind of perhaps break down a little bit what we mean by conflict, or maybe there's different degrees of conflict, right? The first, most fundamental would be in the presence of something that is different from me. So how I confront that difference. And so from that layer is extremely beneficial, because you need the difference to put you in an uncomfortable position. That means that you are more faced with the unknown, and therefore you have to exercise a high level of engagement or learning or creativity or fluidity or adaptability. And so any of those traits are going to be beneficial for the evolution of spirit. So in that way, challenges, failure, discomfort in terms of that I have to do something that I'm not that used to, that's very beneficial. Let's take this super simple example. I have fear of public speaking, which I had fear of public speaking. And talking to one person like you this moment, it is technically a public speaking event for me, as for anybody. So I would go very nervous, right? So that was a conflict. Oh, I have to give a speech in public. Conflict. Uncomfortable. What will they think for me? Will I tremble my voice? Will all the things of my belief kicks in, right? That conflict and me facing that conflict and coming through it is highly necessary for evolution. Now, the conflict where I'm gonna hold my flag and I'm gonna take it to the death, because the differences are I'm fixed in my differences, and I do not accept any of your differences, and I need to impose mine. So that kind of a dead end position in confrontation to conflict that keeps us the opposite, keeps us stagnated. And so in the presence of conflict, the next moment is, how can we roll with it and keep the energy flowing?
So, what's your understanding then? What aspects make up a human being? It seems that we have a few lineages within us. We have, our first attention, our physical form has its history in regards to our genetic memory, the memory of our family that's been passed on for millennia, whatever habits, whatever have been passed on through there. Our energetic archetypes, I imagine, must have its evolutionary process. And then I imagine at another level, we are something that's evolving at a level far beyond this one.
Yes.
What's your understanding of to go into conflict, to understand conflict, such as maybe public speaking? For me, I get very nervous too. I'm like, for a couple hours before speaking with you, I have to kind of calm myself. I mean, I hate that I'm still like that, even but I make all sorts of challenges up for myself that of potential for failure, whatever kind, right?
Well, you're doing great. And my teacher, if my teacher was talking, he would stop you when you say hate and say, "Wait,
I know.
Take the word hate, just pull it out of your head, flick it out,
yeah,
let it go, and then you rephrase, right? Because the syntax that we use, it dictates our awareness,
Yeah, as soon as I said it, yeah.
But that is, yeah. So I mean, I'm not sure if I'm going to address exactly your question, but what came to me listening to your question was, there's different aspects of that make up who I am, and we have definitely one of them. Obviously, is the genetic material, right? What is imprinted to us in our genes, kind of already typed out. This information is typed, right? That's one influence. The second one is the epigenetic field. All the way that we can take that typed out information code and then rework it, shift it in so many ways that only in some minor percentage of situations where we have a gene that misses a key enzyme in a pathway that is just like no way around it, and will lead inevitably to the development, pretty much so, of a condition, a disease. Most of others are malleable, pliable. We could modify. So by how we intervene in the epigenetic field, we can change the course of the direction of our lives. So we receive this influence and we change around how we manifest it. So that flexibility, that's one of the exciting fields in the world today. Epigenetics, neuroplasticity, and the microbiome, the understanding of this universe of other consciousness that lives with us. I mean, we have there's more genetic material that is foreign in any human body than self. So that ought to tell us already a lot. We are more non-self than self. Or in other words, then what is self? Because we have to include the consciousness of all those bacteria that live in our gut and our skin. So, which nowadays they're discovering amazing things, like our even personality traits are influenced and dictated by the flora. Then there's the environment of the womb, which now is emerging as a huge influence in who we are. The 9 months that happen between conception and birth, they impact us. Now we're seeing that even they prime our genes to develop in a particular direction 40 years later after birth. That's far reach. But also, conversely, we can influence positively things that way. So the womb environment. And then lastly, there's something that is that travels along the lineage. That is what my teacher called the links, the family energy lines. And there's certain imprints that belong to our lineage that are passed on to us. um, and they are in some other layer. Perhaps they might be found in the epigenetic field, but my belief is that they exist in another frequency that is not bound to the biology, but they certainly influences us. And so we ought to look at those things that are our energetic imprints and work with them as well. And the energetic imprints can also include things that are difficult to understand linearly, like premonitions or past life experiences, or having clear experiences and images and all full responses based on things that happen that belong to a different type of the country, culture, and time in the world. My teacher would say that different areas in our consciousness are existing in this moment in different time zones in the world. Maybe a viewpoint from the Indian philosophy might be that about the reincarnation, different takes on a process that puts us in the same place, which is we do have access energetically to experiences, sometimes all-encompassing experiences that took place in other times and other zones. Right? So that's also part of what we work with, and all of them comes into the process of self-awareness. That's the game.
So is that something that you find through recapitulation?
Recapitulation is huge. Recapitulation is a necessity. First, because it gives us this is a technique that is basically we take our consciousness and we travel back in time to an event that happened in the past, earlier in the same day or 20 years earlier, and then we insert our consciousness in that moment. We relive the experience from within, and as we're doing it, we bring in awareness, and we bring in the breath as a means to clean the experience, of so to speak. First of all, understanding. Whoa, get a real detached view of what exactly is happening. So for our understanding of who we are and our beliefs, that's critical. But also, in addition to that, it does something energetically. It restores an integrity. It heals it. It mends what we call the injuries to our energy field. Maybe there was a trauma, there was an interpretation that got stuck with us, and then we carry it for 20 years, and it has limited us in many different ways. So we can go back and shift things around so that the impact is different. In neuroscience, there's something called memory reconsolidation, which is how when I have an experience and I give a meaning to that experience, I store it in my limbic system, and then it's stored bound to the interpretation of that moment. And so I can go back, I can, just as in a computer, I have a document I store in a folder, and I can open it again and then look at it, tweak it, get a different take on it, and then store it back. I can do the same with a memory. I can work with it, change the interpretation attached to it, and therefore the emotional and then behavioral impact that it had moving forward, and then work it and then file it again in my memory. It's a memory reconsolidate. I reconsolidate that memory and spin the impact it has, the viewpoint, and function affects form. If I change the way I function, I'm going to change my physicality. And to change function, I need to change my belief. So the recapitulation allows me to do that change so that then I come out back to my today's self and I am more restored. I understand myself better, and then I can behave functionally in a new way. And that's the ticket.
Do you practice recapitulation in your dreaming?
I practice recapitulation. Recapitulation is more of a process that happens when you are in your waking hours, and then the dreaming is a little bit of a different thing because you can definitely get information from dreams that you can apply then to a recapitulation process, or you can have simply the experience of just doing cool things in dreams that is just enhancing because it's exciting to get in touch with the capacities of human beings, like flying and moving to different places. So they go hand in hand. Recapitulation is more the realm of the stalking, of the breaking down the elements of reality in a deliberate manner. And dreaming is more the act of allowing consciousness to travel to new places and access those places. So it's like the process of inhale and exhale. They go hand in hand.
Do you practice dreaming on a regular basis?
Yeah, and dreaming is something that we practice. All of us practice dreaming because we are, like my teacher said, we're always dreaming. We all dream all the time, and the question is, what do we dream, and can we choose what to dream? But dreaming as the act of setting your perception into a particular way. Even if you are super excited and fully engaged in a project, you're dreaming. You're in that dream of that project, right? And then let's say you go and you from there you go and to do play soccer with friends, and then you are fully in the game of soccer. So you've changed dreams, and you're doing two different dreams. Or if I'm pissed off at my neighbor and I've been pissed off for 2 weeks and I can't get out of that state, I'm caught in that dream. So wherever we are perceptually, that is the dream. And can we choose a variety of different dreams? And can we be fluid, not to be trapped in any given one of them? That's what we are looking for.
So is the idea, just quickly, is the idea then to combine the awarenesses? Is that a goal for you personally?
My goal would be, the image would be walking towards infinity, holding hands side by side. If we want to give an image, more than combining, right? We ought to keep our cohesiveness, our individuality, but it's a shared individuality. It's not one where we merge and then we kind of become in a way there's a merging of consensus, but we all retain our individual self.
But I mean within yourself, the tensions within yourself. Is your goal to merge them within? Is that what you're referring to with the hand?
Oh, I see. To merge the different attentions within myself.
Yes.
Well, I would say that to have access to communicate and integrate. I wouldn't necessarily merge because but to be able to dance back and forth. Right. One of the beautiful ideas, and I leave you with that, is we as human beings, we have the capacity, is our natural birthright, to have one step in the linear world and one step in the non-linear. My teacher would say one step in the tonal, one step in the nahual. And to be able to do so without detriment to each other. In fact, more so, to be able to do it, and in that way, both get enhanced. And we can go back and forth between the two, or we can be in both at the same time. And that's what's available to us as conscious beings. And it's I think a super exciting possibility that makes everything more vibrant. And so I'm always enticed to be looking at both perspectives and can I incorporate them, can I integrate them? So in that way, yes, I am looking for an integration between my layers within me, so then I can have that fluidity between both points of view. And it's my teacher would say, if you live this way, I don't know what's going to happen, but I can tell you something, you won't be bored.
Thank you so much.
All right, thank you very much. A pleasure. Okay, awesome.